You were just saying about PAGA. Is that what it's called?
Yeah.
PAGA?
Mm-hmm.
What's that stand for?
Private Attorney General Act.
What is that?
It's where the attorney stands in the shoes of the attorney general, who might have the ability to file like a consumer rights case.
Right.
But they don't have the bandwidth. And so we're trying to encourage, through laws like PAGA, private attorneys to actually stand in the shoes of the government and bring those types of claims, because it's in everybody's best interest to bring claims that crack down on like consumer fraud or labor code violations.
A public policy thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's why we have it.
That's interesting. That means that so certain firms and certain private attorneys might act as the state in some ways. I didn't realize that can happen.
Yeah. It's also called a key tam action that you may come across, maybe in constitutional law.
Uh-huh.
You don't have that yet?
No.
Okay.
That's next year.
Yeah.
I don't even know what the Constitution is. I've never heard of it.
They should have covered that first day.
I know that there's a Constitution and we're guided by it. I think and it's weird because there's an assumption that people know these things, that like, oh, there's a Bill of Rights and there's a Constitution, but I guess we can't assume that people know that anymore.
Yeah.
Is that we don't do civics education?
No, we do. And we do need to hold students accountable for knowing it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I just say because I've taught a million American history courses, and on the first day I'm always like, let's get on the same page with what America is, And it's like, it feels like very fifth grade, but these are like undergrads, and I'm often answering very basic questions about what the Constitution is, what the Bill of Rights is. You're looking at me like, oh God.
That's a problem.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it also explains a lot of where we are right now.
Well, no one knows anything. Yeah. It seems like. I wanted to ask you how things are going with your cases this week. What's popping out? What's the update in terms of anything exciting happening in your world?
Sure. We have a couple newer big cases where we're dealing with kids who have been like inappropriately touched. Some crossover, into maybe like sexual touching. So right now, a lot of it is just a lot of talking to parents and listening. When I say talking to parents, I mean setting up the meeting and then letting them kind of share their fears and their questions. Oof. Because when there's a criminal investigation going on in a school setting and the school is either not sharing a lot of information or just giving a very basic party line, which sometimes they do need to do, but parents then are spinning out in all of the worst case scenarios, what could have happened to my child, what didn't happen to my child. So what they know in this particular case is that a teacher was placed on leave in December, and then they just found out, essentially last week, a lot of them found out that he had been arrested for several charges of inappropriate touching of a minor. So we're talking them through the process. We know more about the situation, but to keep our client confidences, then we're sharing what happens in the process, what is publicly available, what resources they have. So basically just sharing, and then also telling them, hey, we're here if you have reason to believe that something may have happened to your child. And we take it from there. But because it's such a devastating, sensitive subject area. There's a lot of relationship building right now for clients and potential clients.
Is it all in person, or is it sometimes like Zoom calls? And
yeah,
things like
this isn't in our immediate area, so all of these meetings have been happening on Zoom.
Wow. Is this a public school, private school? I don't know how much you're at liberty to discuss.
Sure, it's
so
public.
Far,
I can't share too many details yet.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's a public education institution.
So how does a case like this generate? Like, is this someone contacting you directly, or are you getting a lead somewhere else, or how did you first get to this? Because I'm imagining parents reading I don't know how they would find out,
right?
But finding out about a teacher and then thinking, oh, this was my child was a student of this teacher,
right?
I should find out more about this.
The first family affected that came forward, I should say, knew of me through a student who I used to coach through mock trial.
Wow.
Years ago.
Wow.
Years ago. And
Mock trial just keeps coming back.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The networking, the legal network.
Well, it's a small county and small area in a lot of ways. It feels like.
But even here, these they're all out of county.
Okay.
Everyone we're talking about, but the network is broad.
Yeah.
Yes, the long arm of the law. Did you cover that in civil procedure?
No, we haven't done I haven't done civil procedure yet. I don't even. I've just learned like that. When I hear Civ Pro, I hear people saying these like little buzzwords from law school.
Yeah.
It took me a second to be like Civ Pro. Oh, that might mean civil procedure, but no, I haven't done that yet.
Okay.
Well, so I don't know the process at all.
Wait. It can be a little dull,
Yeah.
but it's important. And now internally, you asked me what I'm working on this week. Internally, I've also started, in addition to like our regular case review meetings and check-ins, we're also just setting aside designated time to work on our procedures in the civil department because the cases can become so complex and there's so many moving parts. It's really helpful as a group to sit down once a month and review and revise and really just update and improve as we continue to learn, as the law continue to evolve, like how we're operating as a team in the department. So we're doing that too. So I call it civil procedure meeting, but it's not the kind of civil procedure that you were talking about for your class.
Okay.
It's our internal procedures.
It's your civil procedure.
Yep.
Yeah. I mean, so what for people that are listening, saying, "What is civil procedure? What is this?"
Like the rules that govern how a case will evolve. So, for instance, to start a lawsuit, you file a complaint, typically in state court, and you have a certain amount of time to do that. And we call that the statute of limitations. So this is like a fundamental civil procedure concept.
You're teaching the whole class right now. I love this.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I mean,
I don't think that everyone wants to hear about civil procedure.
Well, I mean, I think it explains partly why I keep asking about, like, well, how did they contact you and what did you do? Because to me, like, those parts of the law are really obscured to most people in terms of, like, what the actual process is, what it looks like when something like this happens. Even, like, I mean, I wanted to talk to you today about personal injury, and, like, that is such a wide field, obviously. But I think there's a mystery to it for people, for something that is so present in the culture. In other words, I see the billboards of like, have you been injured in an accident? Call this number, right? Everyone's seen those. Everyone has experienced them. But I don't think everyone knows exactly what happens when you call that number.
Yeah.
And like where you go from there, how you start a case, how you figure out what you're doing. So that's why I keep asking procedural questions in part, because I want to know like what it's like.
No, it's a great question and something I've spent so much time on, especially in the last year and moving forward, because it entails marketing and the business side of the practice.
Yes.
And so the personal injury space is, if not the most competitive, one of the most competitive markets, because if you do get your system down, obviously you don't want to turn into a mill, but if you have like a call center, for instance, because you have a billboard in downtown LA and you're getting calls every day from people who have been in a car accident and want to know if they have a case and how much it's worth, then you have to have that system there ready to go to take the call and close the case if it's a good case that meets your criteria for that firm that they'll take. The reason it's the most competitive is because if you have it set up to run efficiently, it's the most lucrative type of law, because for hopefully not too many people listening have been in a car accident, but if you have, then if there's an insurance policy involved, sometimes multiple insurance policies, right? If it's two different drivers and they're both insured, then you collect all of the data that relate to like what medical treatment you had to get. You find out the policy limits, and then you know really quickly, okay, well, how much money, how deep a pocket is available right now? Is it a $20,000 policy or is it a $500,000 policy? And then based on your damages, you can often turn those cases to get the policy limit very quickly. So if you are turning policy limits results, getting your $500,000 within 6 months, and you're charging the client 30% of that fee, then
turn and burn.
For the amount of time that is involved, it's a really good return on your investment.
And it's weird because you and I have talked a lot about torts and personal injury from the perspective of like how the system is essentially designed to make people whole through a money payout for some wrong that's happened to them. And that can be something that is really helpful to people. Like, they need this. In other words, like, there are people that come through the door or call these personal injury attorneys, and they need the help. In other words, there's this balance between sort of raking it in and kind of like figuring out a way to make money off of this. At the same time, it's essentially helping people through that system. And the balance of that is very interesting to me.
Yeah.
Because we all know that there's like sort of a balance there between those things.
Right. But then there's the disparity in the quality of the help that you get. So sometimes
That's
if you're
true,
going to call
yeah.
a bigger firm that is a mill, then you're probably not going to get as much individual attention. And you may oftentimes not get all of the hand holding through the finality of the process.
I would expect that. Like, am I ever going to meet that big attorney that's on the billboard?
Right.
Or is it
No.
like...
No.
I mean, it seems like when you call those numbers, you're calling like a big corporation, essentially.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. And then the reason that oftentimes hand-holding, especially on the back end, is important is because exactly what you said is that people, if they treat, we say, if you get medical treatment for your injuries, then whoever treated you oftentimes has a lien to get paid back through their services. Even if your insurance paid for it, then you have to deal with liens at the end of the case. And if it's not handled properly, then those lien holders can come after the individual clients and get sometimes in excess of what the settlement may be.
Yeah.
So it's just this other nuanced, specialized area in personal injury law that's becoming more and more time consuming. So when I said earlier that, yeah, you can turn and burn a case and you can make a good profit, but more often than not, there's a ton of work that goes into not just setting up the case and getting the settlement demand, but then after you get the check from the insurance company, there's a lot to do to make sure that the client is protected and taken care of, because we engage in lien reduction conversations all the time on virtually every case, so that we are trying to minimize the amount that is taken out of our client's settlement, because it doesn't affect our fee.
Yeah.
It's just another added benefit that we give the client.
Now, are your adversaries always insurance lawyers for insurance companies? Because I imagine insurance companies are in this war as well. They're not just going like, "Oh, I'll just pay out whenever you ask me to." They it seems like their entire point is to try and limit how much money the insurance company wants to pay out.
Yeah, but if we're settling cases before filing a lawsuit, which can be done in a lot of personal injury to auto accident cases, we oftentimes don't get to an attorney. We're dealing with an insurance adjuster, an actuary, whoever that company has on their team, to figure out, okay, is this settlement demand within the brackets of what we have set up for this type of case, and how this should settle and what we should pay out based on all of their risk evaluations.
And those insurance adjusters, their role is similar. Like, they're there to sort of figure out how can we not pay this.
They have huge case amounts. So we have one really frustrating situation right now where we received a check for a policy limit from an insurance company. And it was made out to 3 different people or entities. It was made out to the client, it was made out to our firm's trust account, and then it was made out to Medicare. And I'm looking at it, I'm like, how the hell am I going to get the federal government to endorse this check so we can put it in our client trust account and then distribute to our client?
Right.
Trying to get somebody on the phone, even the assigned adjuster on this case, because they won't give you an email. A lot of times they're still operating over fax machine. And if they don't pick up their phone, it was impossible to make
the
progress.
Insurance companies?
Yeah.
They make it difficult.
Yeah.
Yeah.
This was Geico.
Well, that's why you need a lawyer, right?
Yes, because we just on our
Because who wants to
list
sit
now.
on the phone all day
Exactly.
trying to get Geico on the phone? Yeah, I mean, it's impossible,
So
honestly.
we just basically set up weekly reminders to call this person to try to get them on the phone so that we could get a check reissued that we could actually do something with.
Is it mostly car accidents when it's personal injury? Because it seems like all of those advertisements that you see are like, have you been injured in a car accident? It seems like there's a gigantic market of people that are constantly being injured in car accidents that need help figuring out how to get paid through their insurance companies. Is that true? Mostly cars?
Yeah.
Workplace, I guess, would be the other one.
Workplace injuries are typically going to be fall under workers' compensation.
Okay.
Which is a whole nother world set of laws.
Not necessarily a tort
compensation
kind of thing.
structure. No. No. So if people call because they were injured at work, then we're almost always sending them out to a workers' compensation attorney because that's a very specialized area of law with its own rules.
That's good to know.
If the employment cases we will take are when there's been discrimination because while you have been injured at the workplace by being discriminated against or sexually harassed, it takes it outside of the workers' comp sphere. And you're in a discrimination setting. So
That's
those
an
cases
important
we
distinction. If I heard that, I forgot it.
Yeah. Well, I think it gets back to your original question, like how do people find us?
Yeah.
And for me, looking at our marketing strategy, what information can we put out there that's helpful to people that make them want to call us and get more help?
Podcasts and social media posts.
Yeah, exactly. Like, subscribe.
Yes.
I'm
I'm joking, but I do want to talk about that.
Yeah,
Go ahead,
but I mean,
because the
putting
marketing
out-
thing is really important. It seems like ever since I started this podcast, started putting things up. My algorithm has changed on my social media. So on like Instagram, I'm all of a sudden seeing all these advertisements for things I had never saw before.
Personal injury attorneys?
Yeah, personal injury attorneys, but not just the guys and girls who are saying, "Hey, have you been injured in an accident?" It's more like behind the scenes stuff where they're like, "Hey, do you own a law firm? And are you trying to figure out how to negotiate the busy world of personal injury?"
Oh my God. Welcome to my inbox.
Yes, right.
My email
I don't
inbox.
think most people know that there's like a whole world of like law firm analysts and motivational speakers and even, I mean, conferences and things you're going to, like trying to figure out how to not only run a firm, but run a successful firm and run kind of a firm that is unique in its way in what it's offering, away from all of the kind of like wash of lawyers we see on TV every day.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Oh yeah, it's fascinating. So in my inbox every morning, there's probably 20 different emails from these type of vendors. So, do you need help with your SEO? Are you looking to hire? We are a headhunter. Or, I have this candidate, and on to the point where I think I'm just going to hire someone who is a lot of law firms I know, especially PI firms, are using people who are offshore to kind of help as like an administrative assistant to go through and sort your inbox.
Yeah.
Because of how insidious marketing is now and how
it's
many
like
people can get a hold of you.
influencers. They're like legal influencers. They're like mostly guys who have that come on that are like kind of like, if you're doing still doing this at your firm, you're wrong. Like, click on my link and check out what I've got to say about this particular secret thing your firm has to be doing. And if you're not, you're failing. And it's really like, it's clickbait. It's there, but it's fascinating to me because it feels like there is a competition.
Oh, yeah.
Among lawyers to sort of distinguish themselves among a sea of lawyers.
Sure. I mean, have you heard of the series called Mastermind?
No.
So this is for just all different types of industry, but higher level business management, and how do you push yourself to get to the next level in terms of how well your business is operated or run. A lot of entrepreneurs. So now applying that mindset in the law firm setting is something that hasn't been done for as long traditionally.
Yeah, right.
So now bringing all of those concepts here for me is a really fun just undertaking because it encompasses a lot of different skill sets, areas that have been in the business world for a long time, but haven't always been applied to law firms, at least not law firms of our size. In big law, sure. They've got CFOs and COOs because they need them because they've got hourly clients who pay them a lot of money all of the time, like institutional clients, right? Like when I worked at White & Case, I was in the bank finance group. And so there were a couple of banks where White & Case was their go-to law firm. So of course you're going to throw a ton of resources into making sure that all of those clients' files are handled really well, and then that client is happy, so that you keep that client because it was employed. That bank finance group at White & Case when I was there over 20 years ago had over 25 attorneys in it.
Wow, a team. The firm.
Right. Yeah. So the business side of running the law firm is over half of what I do all of the time.
Really?
In addition to just overseeing most of our civil cases.
Now, I think that's what I was trying to get at in our conversation when we talked with all the partners together last. We talked about sort of the difference between working for someone else and being an attorney that's part of your own firm. It seems like, I mean, I didn't realize that I mean, I would guess. I guess it is more than half of what you do.
Oh,
so
yeah.
how does that balance work for you? Because it seems like
There's more
you're
work.
already doing a lot as a lawyer.
There's more work, and Jen and Ron and I were just talking about this as we look at evaluations of who's here and potential future owner partner criteria. I think people have the idea that so we were joking that it used to be when Ron and Jen and I were younger attorneys that the way to get ahead is to show up first, leave last. You always want to be working harder than your boss or the person who you want to promote you. It seems like that attitude has shifted. I don't know when, but now it seems more that there is an expectation that no, it's about me, the employee, and my personal satisfaction. Is this my soul's work?
Yeah.
Without, which is good. It's good to love what you do.
Yeah.
If everyone found that, I think we'd have a much better functioning society. But you also have to understand and appreciate the needs of the business and what it takes to run a business.
Yeah.
You can't just show up and say, "Oh, I would like to be a partner." So there I am,
Yeah.
wave of a magic wand. It doesn't work that way.
Well, what's changed? Because it seems like it's something that Jen and I were talking about last week, is the sort of idea of respect and civility, and like something's been lost. There's Jen was saying how there's a push within the legal world to sort of recalibrate our ideas of civility and sort of how we treat each other. And we've heard that a lot at the law school, talking about we've lost something somehow. Like, I don't know if it was pandemic or internet or what, but it seems like that might be tied to what you're talking about a little bit.
Yeah,
sort
I
of like
think
the idea of like losing focus of what we're doing.
I think there's some overlap, but I mean, looking back, when I was in law school, there was still a lot of emphasis on that. But what's the shift that I perceive is in society at large.
Yeah.
How much patience and grace, or how little patience and grace we have with one another. And then, of course, because when we all come to work, no matter what you do, you're bringing in your environment from home, society, whatever it is that you are encountering outside of the workplace, it comes into the workplace. So from a managerial perspective here, a big emphasis now is working on our culture, our firm culture,
Yeah.
to actually be really explicit about what are our values, how do we treat one another, how do we communicate with each other, because I guess it's kind of like what it was for kids going to school, right? Like you go to learn certain rules of socialization and how to act in a broader group. And so we're also not just teaching that, but basically making it clear what's expected. And if you don't want to conform to those rules, then you can go work somewhere else. Yeah.
There's a sign on the wall that says that, actually. If you don't like it, go work somewhere else. No. I'm wondering.
But it's in a good way, because
Yeah.
they're asking everyone to be respectful, be civil, we have our core values are ACT, A-C-T.
What does that mean?
Accountability, which basically is owning what you're doing, including mistakes and learning from them. The C is common sense,
Right.
which isn't so common. Okay, it's the hardest thing I think to screen for through the application and interview process is whether or not somebody actually possesses common sense.
Oh, yeah.
And that's just, and problem solving.
You learn that over years of knowing someone.
Yes, sometimes,
Yeah,
right? Spouses learn it, and then the
Yeah,
marriage
like,
ends.
where is your common sense?
Right.
Yeah, it
And
fluctuates.
Yes, the T for teamwork, because we do all here really value one another and we help one another out when we need it. If someone's got to leave early to go take care of a family member, someone else is always there to pitch in and help, and I think that makes our workplace unique and a good place to be.
This isn't coming to. This is part of why I think the podcast is important for a firm like this, because this isn't a place that's like the 1-800-lawyer place that's like coming to like a cold, giant corporate office. No. This is like a house. The fact that we're doing this podcast up in the attic of this house, that people, you can see more of the house on social media of me just walking around what it looks like in here. But it feels like, I mean, the first time I came in here, it was Christmas time. So there was like a big Christmas tree. It looked like a Charles Dickens house, from like that you imagine. And so I don't know. It feels like those, whatever that means in terms of values of a place. How do we translate that to our client's experience? Because it seems like that's That's what I think is the most positive thing about Bambi and Smith as a firm,
Yeah.
is sort of this home family type experience. And yet there's also this home family is bridging you into this crazy legal world. And you want to know that home and family is sort of like taking you there.
We're working. That's our first quarter goal this year, is to do exactly that. Is bridge how we treat one another internally, and what do we like about that, and how can we apply that to enhance our client experience,
Right.
to be even better than it already is. And so when you say, like, what is that bridge, I think it's that we're aware again, and we're saying out loud how we consciously treat one another and interact with one another. And then we do the same things for the clients, for instance. So it could be a matter of setting a target of response time for a client. Like, any client who contacts us, we're going to get back to them in 48 hours. You know, even if we're in trial, you know, we've got a bunch of deadlines. So setting those types of measurable targets that kind of just then reinforce the value from the client side too. I mean, because our work takes a ton of listening, empathy, as you've already heard. We've talked a lot about how we are counselors at law. And so, but it's more basic too. How do we answer the phone?
Right.
What is the client response time? That kind of thing.
Yeah, and I mean, how you communicate that is tricky, because I mean, we've talked a lot about sort of advertising, and the tone of advertising is very much to get you to click on something, right? But that doesn't often communicate what the experience is really like and what it's really like to go to that firm. I mean, you're saying like, yeah, I see this attorney on TV that's saying, I'll fight for you, but I'm never going to meet that guy. That office is a TV set, and like, I'm going to go through some really cold experience. It doesn't give me a very good idea of like what a firm is really like.
No, not at all.
And so that's partly why I'm thinking about podcasts and social media and that sort of thing, to sort of give a documentary sort of reality to people of like what a law firm can be apart from that experience, if that makes sense.
Oh, it does. Because to me, what it reminds me of is when I did live in New York City, and you were going to go grocery shopping.
Yes.
Right. This was before there was a Whole Foods.
You're going to bring
in
up
the
trauma
city.
to me.
This was before there was a Trader Joe's in the city.
Yeah.
And you go to your local cheese shop, meat market, bakery in your neighborhood to go get whatever it is that you want to make over the weekend, or, you know, dinner for friends and family. And so in that way, you know where your food's coming from, right? You know the person who owns the shop, you know, like the baker,
right,
who made the bread.
Yes.
It's very different than, I'd say it's akin to what we offer our clients, and seek to offer them in terms of super high quality product, but also like with a face to the name.
The Italian pork store of law firms. I like that. I like that analogy, because I mean, partly what you're talking about is what people desire often is a sort of mom and pop kind of operation. At the same time, people have different attitudes about that, like the different levels of trust of mom and pop operations and that sort of thing. I think that some people do want to go to like a big corporation for one way,
Well,
for
sure.
one
I mean, think
reason or another.
Most people go to supermarkets, right? Because
Right.
one, because they're convenient. Two, because there are more of them. Three, because yes, you do assume a certain level of quality,
Or
like a Bonds or a
consistency.
Safeway.
Yeah. It's like
a
going to
Costco.
McDonald's, I guess.
True.
Yeah.
True. Yeah. If you're going to a firm that is more of a mill and has higher volume,
That's what I'm thinking.
then yeah, you can say it's more akin to fast food than the local bakery.
I wonder. I wonder. I mean, obviously those firms are doing well in the sense of like they have a lot of clients and that sort of thing. But I just wonder what the experience must be. One that's not quite as like. Do they get the maximum amounts of people? Do they really give the attention that you would get from a smaller firm at a place like that?
And well, so from some of the business models that I've been exposed to, you compartmentalize so that it's easy to take on. Like, you can use pre-existing firms if all of a sudden you're getting high collar volume. So you have people there who aren't necessarily like on your staff as an employee to allow you to scale based on customer volume. And in that way, then you're not overextending yourself. The much more difficult prospect in growing a law firm as a business is if you are like us. So when I started 11 years ago, we had 6 people, and now we're just hiring our fourth this year, so I think we have 22.
Wow.
So how big do we get? How quickly? And this is why right now we have a huge push to make sure that all of our culture, our policies, how we operate, and what makes us different
Mm.
is written down, so that if as we continue to bring in more people and slowly grow, then everyone's trained the same way. And at some point, where is that? Where does the smaller law firm or the mom and pop
Mm-hmm.
shop become more corporate?
Yeah.
And so it's a tension and a balance. And I talk to a lot of different law firm owners who own or have owned law firms of different sizes, and everyone kind of has their favorite size because
Right.
of the different needs and problems, or problems that don't exist at that size. Like a law firm of 6 has very different needs than a law firm of 26.
Mm-hmm.
So
And I guess how ambitious do you want to be too, right? Like how big of cases do we want to take? How many cases do we want to take? I remember. I mean, are there times where you're like where a small law firm wants to take a case and it's not doesn't feel like they have the resources to take it?
right, you can get loans for that actually. On the
Wow.
personal injury side, yeah, there are institutions that will lend you, plaintiffs' attorneys, money, so that you don't have to have the costs to front everything just in your bank account, in your operating account.
Amazing. I
Yeah,
had no idea.
yeah,
That makes me think of the Thomas Fire here in Ventura in 2017. A ton of people's houses were destroyed here. I think hundreds of people's. And I was just imagining the insurance world and the lawsuit world and of that event. And I remember talking with Ron about it, and him saying like it was like there were just tons of cases, and you guys weren't sure if you were going to take them. You were here for that?
yeah. Ron and I had a discussion. It was before Jen was a partner, about should we basically bring in a team
Mm-hmm.
to take on more of these cases.
Right. I guess that's what I'm
And
getting at.
at the
Yeah.
time, just due to other circumstances that had nothing to do with the case or even the firm, we decided no. We decided, we will help the people who we know, and a smaller number
Mm.
of cases compared to other firms that scaled. They found people to bring in to basically, those cases ended up being kind of a very similar package per case that you would submit, with some exceptions. But so the firms that just decided, yes, we are going to go for those cases,
Mm-hmm.
then had to bring in the people and the systems and the structure to manage it.
Uh, in thinking about about taking cases like that, and thinking about how ambitious you want to be in terms of what are your values and thoughts and ideas on that? Because we've talked a lot about your fiefdom and the sort of like your notion of like your utopia. I know you care a lot about you've talked a lot about environmental issues. It seems like you guys do big education, civil rights type stuff, discrimination cases. Those seem like a direction that the firm is in, more than personal injury, or is that?
So
I guess the balance between those things is what
both.
I'm thinking about, because you never see those guys on TV. They're like, "Have you been discriminated against racially at school?" I don't see that as often as the auto injury thing.
Right.
And I know that that's something you care about, and I know that's something this firm has. Like, there are plaques on the wall here of like education cases that this firm has won that are like feel like almost like the bedrock identity thing of your firm.
Yeah, we're really passionate about it, and not a lot of other firms do it.
Right.
So those two things combine well, from the business perspective. And yet, those cases take a ton of internal resources, time, and they're emotional. They're tough. So when I consider my team and the needs of my team and the limitations of any team, we have to be careful that we're not taking on too many of those cases internally, because then we can get overwhelmed and then our client service will suffer. So the auto personal injury, setting that up so that that can run consistently, is a way to fund the bigger and more complex cases, like the education civil rights cases. So that's the goal in the civil department right now, is essentially have a good balance between The personal injury cases where we can work with an insurance adjuster, and it's not doesn't tax us as much emotionally and financially, because we're not laying out as many resources up front. And I don't mean not to say that we're spending any less time on auto accident cases. It just means that typically that we can resolve those more quickly.
They don't require the level of resources of like a big discrimination case at a school.
Exactly. And because those are usually harder fought.
Yeah.
And so we end up in litigation, and then getting back to your question about civil procedure, then we have all these other things to do once we file a lawsuit. That's why our attorney fee percentage goes up once we file a lawsuit. So it's typically 30% if we can finish the case before we have to file a lawsuit, and then it'll bump to 35 or later 40% if we're in litigation, because it's taking up so many more hours.
So that makes sense. I approve that strategy.
Oh,
for the
thank
law
you.
firm.
I'm glad.
No, it makes sense because you're sort of like doing the cases that are personal injury cases that are helping people deal with their auto accidents, and those are things that you have a lot of experience in. You can just do those. At the same time, you're funding and helping like support these larger cases that are about the things you really care about beyond auto injury, auto accidents. It's like educational discrimination and things like that. That's cool.
But
to me, it makes sense.
Yeah, and in those situations,
business-wise even.
And also across all of our practice areas, we're always helping someone who has been through something traumatic.
Right.
You know, or
and I
suffered
imagine
an
there are
injury.
some auto accident cases that are emotionally taxing.
Oh my gosh.
Right?
Yes. I mean, I can state the obvious, but people die in auto accident cases all the time. And we're trying to help a family navigate the loss of a loved one or a severe injury that is ongoing. That's where our client's going to need treatment for the rest of his or her life. So working with experts to set up a life care plan to then justify our ask for 7 figures plus to an insurance company who doesn't want to give us that much money.
Right.
Yeah. So it's trauma of a different nature.
Have you seen that documentary about the McDonald's coffee case, the woman that got burned?
I don't know if I ever saw the documentary, but we studied it in law school.
It's on Netflix. Yeah, I mean, to me, it's just the larger point is how the public sort of took the McDonald's case was like, oh, this is just frivolous lawsuits, you know,
Right.
people. But what you just mentioned about like people dying in car accidents, people being severely injured. I don't know. It makes me mad in part that there is a larger sort of in the public perception that there are frivolous lawsuits about even like the image of the auto injury lawyer that's like, have you been injured? It's like that. It's easy to make fun of that, and it's easy to see that maybe this lawyer is exploiting that in some way or whatever. But there's also just the fact that like there is a holocaust of people that are really seriously injured. Maybe holocaust is the wrong word, but a kind of like a giant mass of people who are injured seriously and dealing with horrible things from car accidents. And it seems like that part of it is obscured in a conversation that is talking about frivolous lawsuits a lot.
Yeah, and I think it's a good point, and you don't, it's not on your radar until it is.
Right.
And it's something that can happen just like out of like our banal daily existence driving to work. All of a sudden your life has changed, or your loved one's life has changed because of a car accident. And that also adds to the trauma of it, because it's like, well, I wasn't undertaking anything that should have made my life any more dangerous or in peril. I was just trying to go to work.
Right.
And then this terrible tragedy happened. So I think that compounds it sometimes. But you're right. It does hurt plaintiffs who do, when you do have to go fight for what you should get in front of a jury. The bad rap that personal injury attorneys have in our society as like greedy or ambulance chasers.
Not
right?
just the
waiting.
lawyers, though, the victims too. There's a sense that people can game the system. There's always this image of like the guy with the fake neck collar coming in, and to me, I'm kind of like, well, how common is that really? Because it takes it's along the lines of people saying that like a lot of women are making up these stories of sexual assault. It's like, do you know what you have to go through to make that up?
Yeah.
It's quite a bit. And like the law is going to find you out if you're faking it generally.
Yeah.
Like I find it weird to think that, oh, it's so easy to just put on a neck collar and go fake a car accident and get millions of dollars from an insurance company. It doesn't seem realistic that actually happens. And yet I feel like that's a common perception. That it's just easy to like go get money.
It's not reality.
Yeah.
It's not, because one, insurance companies they have so much money
Right.
because they have invested so much in making sure that no one is taking advantage of them.
Right.
So they have investigators, if someone makes a disability claim, to actually go and watch someone in the whiplash collar and document whether or not they are acting as someone would if they had that claimed injury. So there's a lot of checks and balances from that side. I can't think of one example.
Of someone like catching someone fake.
Yeah, a colleague of mine who is very skilled and has worked on the insurance defense side for a while, she did have a case where she saved her client, the insurance company, millions of dollars because she was finally able to prove that that person was faking it.
Holy shit.
But it doesn't happen very often. I can think of one case here, but it was before I joined the firm, where Ron told me that he thought a client had exaggerated it. It was when the legislature reopened the time period to file claims against the Catholic Church
Yes.
for sexual assault, and so people could go back decades because it happened when they were young, typically, and we had plenty of clients that were righteous victims and survivors of that behavior. But I remember Ron telling me he suspected that one person who came to us was making it up, and he ended up terminating that person as a client. Wow. And he saw later, because the way that those cases were handled and kind of all wrapped together, that person did end up hiring another attorney and getting money, but that wasn't on us, right? I think we do a lot of client vetting, and feel very passionately about this point that if anyone is going to fake or lie about the injury, then it's going to hurt all of those other righteous claims. Yeah.
That's intense. Mm-hmm. I mean, to me, it's like quite a decision. But at the same time, I guess people smell money, and there's some people that will go through that, but it seems hard.
Yeah, I have not found it to be that common.
I wouldn't think so. Mm-hmm. And yet it's a common idea. I think it's like people think that like everyone games the welfare system or something. It's kind of like, well, you get caught doing that. That's a crime for doing that. And people don't do it as often as I think the perception is. It says something about just the culture of Americans judging each other. Why'd you get that money? Why'd you get $7 million for that car accident? Right. And it's like, I can't walk for the rest of my life. You know what I mean? Like, those are exchanges that are...
Yeah, those people wouldn't accept that amount of money to like be without a leg for the rest of their life.
Right. So I have electives that I have to choose for summer, and one of the electives is education law and stuff like that. And so
Who's teaching it?
I don't know. I have to look.
We'll talk.
Yeah.
Okay.
Because I'm interested in that area of it. I mean, obviously, it makes sense to me because I come from higher education. I've thought a lot about it, but I'm also like completely out of the legal world of higher education. And to me, hearing the cases that you guys have done, it's intriguing. And so the fact that there's a class there makes sense to me.
Yeah,
I might check it out.
Yeah.
It's either that or some like tax thing. I don't know. Yeah.
I know which way I would go.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Thank you, Danielle. Good to talk with you.
Thanks, David.